welcome to the Classics podcast Does Virgil's Aeneid, with myself, Katrina Kelly.
And me, Caroline Lawrence.
Hello, and welcome back to the Classics podcast. I'm Katrina Kelly, and I'm so excited to be joined by my very good friend, the writer Caroline Lawrence, as we take you through the 12 books of Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid, in a brand new way. In each episode, we will be inspired by a particular word, which will act as a jumping-off point for us to explore characters, themes, and poetic techniques. Our favourite Virgilian similes. Hear the sounds of ancient languages and all the images that a single word can conjure up. Thank you for joining us. Caroline is the author of The Roman Mysteries, the series that inspired me to get into classics many moons ago, as well as the Time Travel Diaries, Pantheon, a handbook about the ancient Greek gods, and her recent Aeneid retellings. She's not a bad writer herself, and Virgil has played a big part in her personal and professional life. Caroline, this is so exciting. For so long, we've wanted to do a podcast series together, and we're here to talk about two of your favourite things in the whole world, the Roman poet Virgil and his epic poem, the Aeneid. And also, I think we're going to cover faithful hounds, talisman, ancient rituals, some beautiful imagery, and I'm sure we're going to fall down all sorts of interesting rabbit holes.
It's so exciting. Is it talisman or talismans? Who would know? It probably is talisman, isn't it?
That's a good point. It's a good
Let's
point.
not go down that rabbit hole. There's so
There
many.
we go. We've started already. There'll be many Latin plurals as well, I think, that will come up.
So it's such a thrill to be here on the podcast. And I'm a lifelong learner. I'm still learning. I'm still teaching myself. And I came to classics quite late in life, age 19. I studied first Greek and then Latin at UC Berkeley. And because I came late, I never mastered it as many British students do who start at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 sometimes. But I'll never forget one moment when I was at Berkeley and I was cramming for an exam on Virgil. And I was reading the Aeneid and trying to grapple with the grammar and everything. And suddenly, for a few moments, I could understand everything I was reading, even though some of it was unseen. And I have never forgotten that. It felt like flying. That's the only way I can describe it. The kind of the rhythm, the meter, the visual beauty of the words were just carrying me along. And it was so one of the few transcendent moments I've had in my life. And I haven't been able to kind of recreate that, though I've been studying my Latin diligently.
Mm-hmm.
But recently I was reading Emily Hauser's excellent new book, Mythica, about the women in Homer's Bronze Age. And in her author's note at the very beginning, she talks about how she, at the age of 15, like traveled 3 hours a day to a boys' grammar to learn Greek because she was so intrigued by it. And she says she was reading a passage at her grandmother's house of the Odyssey and trying to make sense of the grammar and everything. And then, like a sailor coming home, the words coming together and the sudden thought, like a swallow flying free, I can read this. And I thought, wow, someone else had that same experience of flying while you're reading a dead language. How crazy is that? Have you ever had anything like that?
Well, I love that she's described that with a simile as well, which is very fitting for this podcast.
She's a great writer.
I can't say I had a transcendental moment, but I did maybe quite literally fly. I remember my old classics teacher's room, and a shout out to Mr. Morton here, that at one time there was a large yellow wheelie bin for unknown reasons in his room where they had amazing collection of books and magazines, all sorts of different articles that when I did have a spare moment, it was really exciting to be able to dive into. And I did quite literally dive into this wheelie bin because somebody had put some books in there at the bottom and I was determined to fish them out and have a look at them before they maybe left the building. And the one that I found was had a red hardback cover, and it was Aeneid 4, the Austen commentary, but it had the text in there. And I just remember picking out, we were studying it at the time, so it was one that I'd started reading, and it's maybe something we'll actually come to in another episode about Dido being described as a doe, and there's a simile there, and there's a word in that about hiret, something sticking in her. And I just remember seeing it in the middle of the page, and it just really kind of, like you say, jumped out at me. felt very real. Perhaps I was being a bit of a teenage love-struck person myself at the time, but it felt very, very resonant.
I think there's something about that age in our late teens, isn't it? Often it's things we read at that age that really strike us and stay with us almost forever and are so important. So that's a wonderful story. Were the books going to be just returned, or they weren't going to be thrown away or anything?
Well, they weren't going to be thrown away, but I never really got to the bottom of what happened to them. I have to admit, maybe here's not the place to admit theft, but I think I probably did take back a few of those books and make sure that if they were being rehoused somewhere, that maybe I could keep them and look at them for a little bit longer first. So,
Very good.
sorry, Mr. Morton, if I still have some of your books.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I mean, I think we both hope that through this podcast, people will catch a sense of the excitement of what might seem dull, which is learning a dead language, but it is extraordinary. And I hope that this podcast will encourage everybody listening to learn even a little bit of Latin. So, as you said, we're going to start with a word,
Hmm.
and then we'll focus down again and maybe spread out again and go down rabbit holes. And so, the first word, um, well,
We'll have
yeah,
to say
I
it
will say
together,
it.
won't we? We'll have to say it together, I think.
Okay, the first word is
Lumen.
lumen. Lumen. Tell you more about that in a sec. So I thought we'd jump into the middle of things in medias res, as Virgil loves to do. I think Horace said that, into the middle of things. So in book 8 of the Aeneid, which Oxford professor Richard Jenkins calls the holiday book, there's this beautiful simile. And of course, similes are the ways that draw us in, aren't they? Um, and after many adventures, the Trojan hero Aeneas has finally arrived in the place he's destined to live. Don't worry, we will be doing an overview of the whole thing, but I want to jump into the middle because most people know who Aeneas was and what he was doing.
And we're being very Virgil, as you say. We are getting right into the middle of things straight.
Right into
In
the
the
middle.
explanation, the padding will come later.
Exactly. We're going to learn so much. So he's arrived in Italy and specifically Latium or Latium. No one knows exactly how to pronounce these words in the modern. That's the area below the Tiber known today as Lazio. Have you been? Have you been?
I actually haven't, no.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so good. Anyway, Aeneas arrives in Ostia, the mouth of the river Tiber, with 7 ships full of refugees, a couple of thousand at most. And they've been sailing around the Med for 7 years. Notice 7, 7.
Hmm.
They all they want is just a piece of land to build a new Troy because they were some of the few refugees who fled burning Troy after the trick of the Trojan horse, which we'll talk about later. But the goddess Juno is against him, as she is against so many heroes.
Of
And,
course.
yeah, and poor Juno. She's stirred up the local Latins. There were different tribes living in Italy, different groups of Latins, some who fought with each other, a bit like the tribes in Roman Britain or pre-Roman Britain. Anyway, like Homer, Virgil uses many similes and metaphors to involve the listener. And Aeneas has discovered that although he came peaceably and he was promised, oh, there's prophesied that a stranger will come and marry a beautiful princess and they'll found the greatest race that ever lived. All this is prophesied. No, it's not going to happen. He's been told he's going to have to fight and it's not going to be pretty. So here comes the simile. I'll read it in Latin. I'll try to do it in meter and then I'll read my translation. And it starts off talia per latium. That means such things throughout Latium. Quae leum medontius eros. Cuncte videns magno curarum fluctuat haestu. At quanimam nunc celerem nunc dividiti luc in partis quae rapit varias perque omnia versat. Sicut aquae tremulum labris subilum in Aeneas sole re percussum aut radiantis imagne lunae. Omnia per volitat late loca iamque suboras erigitur sumique ferit lacuaria tecti. So you can hear the difference even. Some of those are quite sharp and clattery and some are longer. We'll talk about all the meter and stuff later too. But
The real
here's
pace in that third line when you were saying Nunc Cuc Celerem, that's yeah.
yeah, so can you read that line?
Atque animum nunc huc celerem nunc dividit illuc.
That's right. And sometimes I think you blur. So
Mm, yeah.
look are always good. So anyway, it means such was the state of affairs in Latium. The hero Aeneas, seeing it all. He's lying in bed, by the way, worrying. We can all empathize with that. He's tossed on a great sea of troubles. He focuses his quick mind, now here, now there. That's hook look.
Mm.
It turns over every possibility, just as when quivering light on water in bronze basins, reflected by the sun or by the image of the radiant moon, flickers all over the whole space, and now darts up into the air and strikes the coffers of a high ceiling. That's Aeneid 8:18 and following. So first, just super quick, a phrase we're not going to talk about, which is the cliche tossed on a sea of cares,
Yeah.
or curarum fluctuat aestu, which wasn't a cliche when Virgil used it, because as far
Oh.
as we know, he invented it. Go, Virgil. So now it's a cliche tossed on a sea of troubles. But I want to focus on the description of Aeneas's thoughts, which are confused and fractured in a way that I really understand. And I think of it as my bug brain that goes in little circles and can't find a way out. But he has this much better simile instead of a bug of dancing light dancing off the reflection of water in a copper bowl. And did, this is interesting. Can you, when you read, do you have pictures in your minds of when you read the word, say, bowl, copper bowl? Do you have an image of that in your mind?
Yes, I do. I've spoken to friends that don't and that see things very differently, or and those different conditions of the mind that make you envisage different senses. I think yeah, I would. I do picture something which is copper colored. I think I probably see colors more than I see shapes.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I was surprised to find some people can't see images at all. Aphantasia, I think it's
Yeah,
called. But for me, I don't see super clear, but I see quite clear. I have vague images, but it's enough to bring it out to spark that the right brain, which we'll talk about later. Anyway, so visualize a copper bowl, everybody listening. See if you can visualize one. It's quite nice, isn't it? A copper bowl. It's elegant. It's attractive. But if I
think
say
of it being
base,
wide and open.
exactly, and it's a beautiful color, and it might even have. I mean, I've got a little Tibetan sounding bowl. One of those little yoga bowls. But if I say something like basin or tub, it connotes something completely like a modern bathroom, frankly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Or
Is,
washing.
is, is it bad that when you say tub, I think of ice cream? But that's definitely not what I'm thinking
That's a
about.
lot. Think of a little paper tub. So we're going to stick with bowl. And he uses the word Aeneas, which is the ablative plural of the adjective Aenus, which means copper. And of course, that makes you think of Aeneas himself. So it's almost like his mind is a copper bowl with this reflective surface. So we get a nice tension between water in a bowl, which is cool and clean and pure, and then the dancing light, which represents disturbing thoughts. And um, I this really resonated with me because my husband and I are so blessed. We have a riverside flat in London, and our living room faces west. And in the midsummer, the sun's right there, and we actually have to draw the curtains. But sometimes the sun bounces off the surface of the river and comes through a little crack in the curtains, the drapes, and it makes this beautiful kind of rays on the ceiling and wall, kind of flickering, and it's really beautiful. So I thought, Virgil saw something like that too, and at first I thought maybe Virgil was at a friend's house in their bathhouse maybe and saw the light reflecting off water or something. Why a friend's house? Well, because often if we're in a new place like a friend's or a hotel, we're more attuned to the world around us, and it's fresh and it's new, and there was a kind of wonder. And I thought, did Virgil see this at a friend's house? But then when I dug a little deeper, I discovered that actually um, he borrowed it from Apollonius of Rhodes. And in fact, Virgil borrows everywhere, but he does it brilliantly and so cleverly that it's like really meta and deep, and can suck you down new rabbit holes and shows you how clever he is and how clever you are.
Hmm.
So specifically, he got that bit from um, from a passage in the Argonautica by Apollonius of Rhodes. And that's Argonautica is a little four-book epic poem about Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece. And it's written, I think, about 200 BC, Apollonia in Greek. And Apollonia, it's famous for showing Jason as kind of wooden and two-dimensional, but Medea as really sympathetic. And
Hmm.
she's a young girl in this. So and this is the passage that Virgil has stolen from. And I'll just read the first few lines in Greek because um, I'm not sure how good I am at this. It starts pukna, which is a great word that means crammed together. Pukna, you can almost see it. Pukna. Pukna de hoi cradie stethion and tospen hethuien. Heliu hostis tidomois any paleta aigle, cudatus exaniusa to deneon e lebeti. I have to go on because there's a really good part coming up. E pu e gaulo kechutai, hedentha kai entha, here and there, that's hook kai look or hook and look. Okain strophalinge tinasitai aisusa. Hostikai and stethesikear elelizitokures. So here's the translation. Her heart bubbled rapid. This is my translation, slightly clumsy, but kind of accurate. Her heart bubbled rapidly in her breast as when a sunbeam flickers in a house, glancing up from water newly poured into a bowl or perhaps a pail. Here and here is shaken, tossed by a swift swirling, tossed by a swift swirling. So too, in her breast, the heart of the girl was quivering. So he stole it, but I think
It's
he
a
made it.
beautiful translation, also, though.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
and so lovely to hear the Greek. I mean, already we've heard some Latin, we've heard some Greek, and all the sense of both the different sounds that they make and also the shared musicality and that rhythm between them both.
And they're both dactylic hexameter. And the only reason I can read that is because I memorized the first line of the Iliad. So I've got that in my head, that rhythm. And it's once you've got it, you can just kind of read it, even if you make a few mistakes. And I try to pause at the caesura, that gives you a little bit of a breath. So,
Mhm.
but that one line, okay, strophalinge tinasitai aisusa, that's the is shaken, tossed by a swift swirling. That's so good.
And that caesura, that's the what we would often use as a comma or a semicolon in
A
English.
little pause, exactly, exactly. And it's often a pause in sense. And so if it's ignored, then that's saying something too. So when you break the rules, that's important as well as when you follow them.
Mhm.
And
And
it's
that
just
comes from a
interesting.
Latin verb, doesn't it? To kind of slice or cut.
Yeah, which we get the word Caesar from, because apparently he was born by cesarean section.
There we go. That's many rabbit holes in one.
That's many rabbit holes. We're going down so many. Here's another little rabbit, just a little aside. In the 4th century AD, the poet Quintus Smyrnaeus, who I have to confess I'd never heard of before, will adapt this simile to make sunlight dance on the surface of water in a silver bowl used by a girl to see her reflection. And I love that. I love that.
So, in these two scenarios, these two similes across these different texts, and as we say, there's so much interlinking and reworking when Virgil's and using sort of his poetic inheritance from people like Apollonius and Aeneas and Homer. Then we've got Aeneas being asleep but having a fitful, restless sleep. And then we've also got Medea having the same, but we're aware perhaps of the kind of the actions and behavior that Medea is going to show soon. So is that meant to make us think about, I suppose, the trouble brewing for Aeneas now that he's in this new place of Latium?
Yeah, and it might even remind us, if we're well read, which of course we would have been, of young Medea, who would make us think of Dido, who he's just left. So there's that whole association too, this girl who's worried about her hero and her heart's beating for him. And I think he might have been dreaming, but I think he was lying awake, trying to get to sleep, as I was last night indeed, and in many nights. Anyway, this is just background for the real exciting aspect of Lumen I want to get to, the bit that shows us that they had a different mindset. And so the word lumen is neuter. Lumen, 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 luminis, lumini, lumine. Plural, lumina, 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 luminum, luminibus, luminibus. So Virgil uses the word in the plural many times to mean eyes, the eyes in your face. And of course, you know this, but this is kind of, it just struck me reading Virgil that the word for eye is lights. And of course, he does use the other word, oculus, oculi, which is the word that we know for eye. But he uses lumina when when sight is especially important. And I just want to read a couple of little lines. For example, in book one, Jupiter defixit lumina regnis Libyae. Jupiter looked down on the kingdoms of Libya. That's Aeneid 1:226. And then we see the ferryman Charon in book six, A Visit to the Underworld, which we'll get to. And Charon, this filthy old scruffy, disgustingly described ferryman, stant lumina flamma. His eyes stand in flame. And the flamma confused me at first until I realized that's a long A at the end. It's an ablative. So at first I thought flaming eyes, but no, it's his eyes stand in flame, or he stares with his eyes in flame, something like that. And then one last example from book four, the Dido book, which uses both words for eyes. Talia dicentem jam dudum aversa tuetur, huc illuc volvens oculos, totumque pererat, luminibus tacitis, et sic accensa profatur. Can you hear all those
Yeah.
kind of hard and prickly? And I'm going to translate really clumsily. Talia dicentem. Dicentem's accusative, at him saying such things for a long time, yam dudum. Tuater, that means she gazes. And aversa means askance. She's kind of turned away. So people from Servius up have tried to figure out what this means, but we think she's looking at him askance from the corner of her eyes, but she's also volvens oculos, rolling her eyes here and there, hook illuc, and wandering over the whole of him with luminibus tacitus, silent lights or silent eyes. And that's an amazing expression. You almost see the fire, the flames, and then thus furious. Akensa literally means on fire, having been set on fire, she addresses him.
Yeah. There's so there's just it brings so many different things together. We've got hic look again. We've got this sense of volvens of things rolling. That's again quite a wild image which captures her frenzy and her madness of how Dido is portrayed in her final moments as well as in the underworld. Akensa and the flames also I guess reflects the way in which the Dido dies as well.
Absolutely. And we're gonna get Aeneas volvens oculos in the very last paragraph of the Aeneid, where we don't want too many spoilers, and these things, they should make you remember them and put them together, and it gives a kind of layers of depth, and it's so brilliant. It's so brilliant. So here's what's exciting about this is that in ancient times there were two types of vision theory, and different philosophies held different beliefs about these. And the first type, the kind of least popular, was the theory of intromission, held by the Epicureans. And remember, the Epicureans were the ones who came up with atom theory, which is amazing.
All those years ago.
Yeah, so many years ago. And that objects are always shedding a thin an atom, minute layer of kind of their shape, and we're shedding these constantly. And these little films of atoms retain their shapes and come into our eyes, hence the word intromission, intro from in and mission from sending, they're sent into our eyes. So that's what the kind of Epicureans like. But the Stoics and the Platonists adhered to extramission, where your eyes send out beams, and you kind of feel the thing you see with your eye beams. And the Stoics believed that these beams were pneuma, which is often translated as spirit, but I think can mean a kind of a life force for the Stoics. And Plato refers to it as fire in the Phaedrus. There's a great quote about how the fire is medium hot that comes out of our eyes so it doesn't burn us. And so this using the word lumina for lights shows us this idea that they believed, and in fact I think they both philosophies or both camps kind of believed that whatever it comes in or goes out, there's some kind of connection between the object and the eyes that
Mhm.
we don't, I think about today. We don't think of looking at someone and actually zapping them with your eyes, but it kind of can happen, can't
Looks
it?
can kill, though. They really can.
Looks can kill. And it's so fascinating because um, to keep my Greek up, I do a YouTube thing called the Daily Dose of Greek, which is a little reading from the Gospels, which is super easy Koine Greek. And there's this one bit from strange bit in Luke and Matthew about the eye being the lamp of the body. And what does that mean? And in Greek, it's holuchnos tu somatos estin ho ophthalmosu. Literally, the lamp of the body is your eye. And in Jerome's Latin, of course, the New Testaments come down to us in Greek, though it may have been originally written in Aramaic. Then Jerome translated it into Latin, and in his Latin, it's lucerna corporis tui est oculus tuus. A slight change there. The lamp of your body is your eye. And it goes on to say, Luke goes on to say, when your eyes are good, your whole body also is full of light. See to it, therefore, that the light within you is not darkness. So again, there's this sense of we have something in us that comes out and touches people. And we also can be touched. We'll talk about that in the next podcast, I think. And I just wanted to mention that the Greeks have this concept too. Homer, for example. So in Odyssey 19:417, Meter de Amphithei metros perifus Odyssei, cus aramin kephalein, teke amphophaea kala. Amphithea, the mother of his mother, his grandmother, clinging to Odysseus. And that word, I love that. Perifus, growing around him
Round. Yeah.
like a vine, kissed his head. Kus, that's kiss. Kus aramin kephalein, kissed his head, and also both beautiful eyes. Ampho kala. And so we've got that sense of eyes in ancient Greece too. And when I went to Naples a few years ago, and that's where Virgil was happiest. He was born in Mantua and died down in Calabria, but he lived his happiest life in Naples, and his tomb is there. And the Neapolitans loved Virgil. In medieval times. He became this amazing superhero magician who did all sorts of amazing things, like got rid of flies, and he built a castle on an egg, which you can still see, the Castel del Uovo. But one of the things he did was he had these eye beams, and he drilled a beautiful tunnel in a mountain which is right in near his tomb, and you can see it today and walk through it. And I think Seneca even wrote about it. So it's like he has these, like Superman with laser vision, and he carves out this mountain path, which is so amazing. So I just love this idea. When you go back to read these primary sources, remember this idea that eye beams can have an effect out. And there's, of
Mhm.
course, there's no scientific proof that we have eye beams. You know, we now all believe in the extramission and reflective light off the retina and stuff. But there's a book I've just ordered and haven't read yet. It's called The Sense of Being Stared At. And it's got a great cover and presumably some anecdotal evidence.
Well, we know somebody that would give a very hard stare.
And we're going to meet him in the next episode.
And it's funny too, I think there's so many points you can make, I think, about eyes in the ancient world, because not only is it within literature, but it's within the archaeology as well, isn't it? Not just medical problems or people highlighting problems they've had with their eyes, they've gone and worshipped and prayed to the gods that they might be solved. But there are also things like the evil eye and using that to ward off evil spirits.
Well, you know, one of my big obsessions is the word apotropaic, and I'm obsessed with it because I think it was everywhere, and we don't see how pervasive, how all pervasive it was to keep away this evil eye. And even today, um, I try to listen. I try to keep my Hebrew up by listening to the parashah, the Hebrew parashah, every morning. And they're taught. It's super orthodox Jews doing this, and he's talking about the evil eye being jealous. So even today they're using that expression. I have lots of fun anecdotes about that.
And you
So,
have an eye right next to you, so that the
oh
eye.
yeah, I have many. I have many. I have a more Malukian behind me, and I have my two eye cushions, which look like a little face looking back at you.
Which is so Greek. I mean, that's what the Greeks did, isn't it, with their drinking cups? When you were at a symposium, then you would have an eye cup, which as soon as you lifted it with two hands to drink from the bottom, then your eyes would be replaced by these painted on eyes from the cup. They had a great sense of humor.
And it keeps away the mischief because you're super vulnerable when you've had a drink of wine from the eye cup. But there's so many different methods, and I think we'll talk about that later because I just love that. But before we you leave book 8, you have a special relationship with the shield of Aeneas, which in book 8, Aeneas has this dream and then he goes up the Tiber in a beautiful scene where Father Tiber appears to him all dressed with green seaweedy hair and gray-green tunic, and Virgil's so colorful, and Tiber promises it'll be smooth and he'll carry him up to this place called Pallanteum, which will become Rome one day. And Aeneas has to go up there, and he makes a friend and an ally and meets a beautiful young man called Pallas. But then later in that same book, he gets a shield the way Achilles gets a shield. So you had a special, did you study that at school?
No, we didn't actually. Something I studied a little bit later, but it's part of, as you say, this is something where we've just talked about Apollonius of Rhodes influencing Virgil's choice of similes and imagery. This is very much a Homeric influence, where in the Iliad, Achilles gets his shield because he needs it to re-enter the battle, because Patroclus has his armor. In Book 8 of the Aeneid, there's less reason, we could argue. This is Virgil kind of testing us as and our suspending our dramatic belief for whether Aeneas actually needs this shield, but it's a perfect opportunity for Virgil to put across images that he wants to show as part of the whole purpose of this poem. It's one of those key propagandic elements we have. We have Jupiter's speech at the very beginning. We have the parade of heroes in Book 6 in the underworld, and this talk of Rome's future. And then we get this shield, where we have all sorts of different, what we would call historical events, parts of the foundation and the early history of Rome, through to its success of Augustus's victory at the Battle of Actium, which to the reader, the contemporary reader, are very much recognizable. We've got all sorts of things we might know from Livy, like the rape of the Sabine women are in there as well, Romulus and Remus as well. But of course, to Aeneas, he doesn't recognize these scenes at all. They are in his future and his family's future. They're not something that he would be able to relate to. So, in a way, it's more mythological to him, even if to us as the reader, it's historical. And that's very different on Achilles' shield, where you've got these other images of peace and of war, which again are on Aeneas' shield, but they are something very far removed from the battle that Achilles is in at that moment. How this relates to eyes, though, is because this shield is, we are seeing it through Aeneas's eyes, the way that Virgil writes, and he does this in a couple of other places throughout the Aeneid, but he does it specifically in book 1 earlier when Aeneas lands in Carthage and he sees these images being built on the side of a temple, this frieze which shows the happenings and battles at Troy.
Oh
So
yeah, that's
he
brilliant.
describes them to us, doesn't he? And I know that all scholars have kind of called this focalisation, a sort of very fancy term, which just means instead of Virgil saying, this is what it looked like, we have Aeneas describing and telling, getting those sense of going, oh, I see that and it makes me feel this way, because he obviously sees the story of Troy, being a Trojan himself, in one way, whereas other people might see it in a different way. So when we get this shield, we're seeing it again in a way through the description of how Aeneas is when receiving it. He's describing all of these things that he doesn't quite understand, but that we can sort of supply extra imagery. But when before you were asking me about the copper basin and can you imagine it? Can you imagine this shield? I mean, there's so many different scenes on it and the ways in which Virgil describes it.
It's like the shield of Achilles. It's impossible because things move on it. And
Mhm.
you can dive into the scene and there's activity and color and stuff. And what Virgil does is what, if Virgil were alive today, he'd be a cinema director, he'd be directing
Yeah.
films. And there's the famous line for all filmmakers, show, don't tell. And he is showing us. But it's genius because he's also doing what he knows Augustus wants, which is a little bit of propaganda. Though if you look deeper, and we'll be talking about this, there's ambiguity there, and there are darker undertones, and it's not just, oh, I'm just going to write this for Aeneas, for Virgil, for sorry, Augustus, and it's going to be beautiful. There's dark stuff there. But one thing about this shield, someone once said to me, the first time travel book is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, because he visits the past, the ghost of Christmas past, he shows him the past, and the ghost of the future, Christmas to come. But reading this, I thought, Virgil's, this is time travel.
Yeah.
He's shown us the past, and he's showing us the future, which of course is his contemporary time. But for Aeneas, this is the future. So Aeneas is a time traveler. He's the first time traveler, thanks to this amazing shield.
I agree with you. And I think that's the perfect way to leave this episode and to take us on to episode 2. Please do come back to the Classics podcast to listen to more of our adventures, I think, in Virgil's Aeneid.